Okay, so this is part two, everybody. So I'm just continuing off from the last one. Um, so in that same apartment that we lived in, where the neighbor that I had his face cut, there was also, I think I've said this before in other videos. There was also a woman who was a prostitute, and there was also an older man, an older man, who I ended up finding out like later when I became like an older kid, that he was like one of these like top like drug dealers in the neighborhood, and I didn't know at the time. So as far as like the prostitute goes, she was always very like, she was always very nice with us. And again, I was pretty young at the time. She didn't really speak much English. For the record, everybody in the building except for, it wasn't like, we didn't live like in a project building, we lived in an apartment building. So there wasn't that many other apartments within that building. So it was us. Then there was the kid with his mother, the one that got his face cut. Then there's the prostitute, and then there's the guy who, the drug dealer guy, and that was it. That was who lived in the building. And all of them were Dominican. We were the only Puerto Ricans in that building. And the the prostitute, like I felt bad for her. It was like we were always seeing different people coming in and out of the building. She, of course, different clients, and that was how she was trying, basically getting by. That's how she was surviving. And I think she even had a boyfriend, and it was like she would have a boyfriend, but then she would also bring in, there was always other people coming in and out of the building. So I guess that they had an understanding. And at that time, as a kid, like, I would see it, and I kind of like, I sort of understood, but I also, I think people make fun of stuff like that a lot until you see it. And so even as a kid, like when I saw it, I was like, geesh, And my dad has this friend that he's known before. I think he's known this friend since before my sister was born. All right, so he's known this guy for so many years. He's like a friend of the family, basically. And he always used to come over, like hang out with my dad or whatever. And he himself, he was Puerto Rican and Dominican, Afro Latino, if you want to call him like Afro Latino. He's black. And every weekend he was one of those dudes that always had a different chick all the time. So he would bring these different women over, and then I would have to see them, and I'd be like, okay. And of course I would, be nice with them or whatever. And then when he would see like the prostitute lady, like he would be like, oh yeah, like blah, blah, blah. And I would be like, ew, cut it out. And I would tell him to stop. Like, it really bothered me for some reason, even though like, I was young, I was still like, I guess, seeing it. I was just like, damn, I don't like to see that and I didn't like him saying it. Like, I just found it to be like kind of like really gross, him like being that way about her too, and then the old man who was the drug dealer or whatever, he always had like this super serious angry face all the time. And I would see him, and like, how you see neighbors, you'll say hello or good morning or whatever, and he was one of those that like, he just like that all the, like, just straight up like angry face, like you didn't say anything or whatever. And he always, he just had this energy that didn't feel good. There's people that I think you see like living in these areas, if you know enough about this. And the one thing that we have to address is that, there's good and bad in every community. There's good and bad people that are middle class. There's good and bad people that are rich. And what people don't like to talk about is that there's good and bad people that live in poor areas. And there's people that are willing to victimize and cause harm to other people within their own community. And we do have to pay more attention to that. And he There was people that would walk around, like with a serious face, but you can tell their energy wasn't like they were doing it out of being malicious. That was just their natural disposition. This man, he was serious, and there was like a certain energy about him that was like, oh God, this guy, there's just something about him that like, like this man was just not. And moral of the story is that I ended up finding out like several years later after us moving out of that area that he ended up being shot and killed. They shot him over 100 times. So whoever it was wanted him out. Whatever he did, I don't know. I don't know any of that. All I know is that he just had this real it felt like a really dangerous energy. And there was times that I used to kind of like get paranoid, even just living within that building and knowing that somebody else lived in the same building as me who just had that energy. I used to get scared. I used to be like, oh, like, what is this person going to attract? And I also used to think that with the prostitute, just because of the work that she did, not because of her herself, but who she was bringing into the building, just because that was how she was surviving. So I used to think that too. And like I think back to all these things and just how things were at that time, and I feel like I could have stories for days. I feel like I could have stories for days, but right now these are the ones that I'm like, that really stand out in my mind. There was another one that I can think of and this was when I was even younger. So I think this story happened before I was even the age of 10. And it was a time that my sister, like a group of girls jumped my sister. And there's this lady who was like a literal, like, I think I brought her up in the video that I did with my husband when we talked about another lady who was a prostitute. This lady, however, who was a prostitute, she was also a drug addict. The Dominican one, to my knowledge, she wasn't doing anything. She was just a prostitute. But this lady, she was like a prostitute because she was a drug addict. And this was like the late 80s. So this was before the time of the other neighbor that I had. This was when we lived in a different building. And my sister got jumped or whatever, and this lady, she was, even though she was a drug addict or whatever, she was like maybe like 4'10", 4'11". She was real little, and she came out and she had like a bat or whatever, and I guess like they were she was like confronting the girls because the girls just so happened to like come around the block, and my sister told the people on the block who they were, like who did that to her. And she was like, "I'm gonna fuck your ass up." And she had this bat. She's this little lady, and we had her like a few people like holding her back, and then there was other people that were trying to jump in with her, and it was just a mess, just going after this group of girls that jumped my sister. It was so crazy. And my sister was also somebody that was really, she was like quiet, stood to herself, didn't bother anybody. We were kind of like I guess you could say like we were kind of like the lame, the lame kids or whatever, and then like the lame kids that were also very like the lighter ones in the neighborhood. I think living with a single dad, that made us stand out even more. Like people knew who we were more for that reason. Yeah, so we went through some things. My parents did. My mom, my dad, my sister. My sister was robbed at gunpoint a few times. Yeah, and luckily, again, knock on wood again. Luckily, that's never happened to me. The worst thing that ever happened to me were people wanting to, like, I would find out that they wanted to jump me, or they just wanted to fight me, and it was always people that I didn't know, like people that I didn't like know at all wanted to fight. I'm like, how do you like not know me and want to fight me? But that used to happen to me a lot, especially in my younger years. Nowadays, stuff like that doesn't happen as much. There was an incident a few years back that I'll touch on, and this was happened on the train. I normally take, there's like a nicer train that I take. I don't want to get too just just for my own sake, I don't want to say which train, what train or whatever, but there is a better way of transportation to get to New York City if I have to go to New York City. And in this case, I took the regular MTA train, put it that way. And there was a time where I'm on the train and all of a sudden there's this woman, she's sitting next to me or whatever, and she has like headsets on, and it's like she's talking to herself. And it took me like a minute to register, and I looked and she's talking to herself and she's laughing. So I looked at her because like at first I was like, you know, when you just see somebody talking, you automatically think maybe the person's talking to me, and I'm just not realizing that the person's talking to me. And she's not talking to me, she's talking to herself, just talking to herself. And me looking at her, glancing at her, it was enough for her to look at me. This was a black woman, and it was enough for her to look at me, and she just started to stare at me, and she got really serious. And in my head I said, oh shit, I caught a glance with somebody who's fucking crazy. I don't know if she was on drugs. I don't know what her deal was. But all I know is that there was another woman sitting in front of me, looked like a mixed woman or whatever. And she dressed, everybody was like dressed ready for like on their way to work. This was before I had my daughter. This was several years ago, but not that long ago. And so the other woman is, she's just looking at me like she was in fear for my life. And I remember that I had a coat on, and then I had I had on this purse. It had a lot of stuff in it. It had books in it and everything. And I had a pen in my pocket. So I managed to grab, like within that time frame where I felt her doing that, I managed to like grab my purse a certain way where I would kind of like wrap it around my arm like this way. And then I had my hand in my pocket and I had a pen, and I managed to have the pen to where the point was out and it was like facing this way. So I was like, if this chick does anything, it's gonna, like I'm just gonna like catch her in the face. I gotta defend myself, right? And that was all I had at the time. But luckily enough, she didn't do anything, but it was like she was trying to egg me on, because she started to say little things or whatever. And it was like, instead of like being like in fear, like I was sort of scared because, I was getting, like I was in like defense mode, ready to do something. But it was also like, okay, if you do something, you're gonna do it or what? Because she was kind of like saying shit. So I didn't keep looking at her. Like I would occasionally glance at her, and I was kind of like laughing a little bit, like, if you're gonna do it, do it. And thankfully she didn't do anything. But I felt that at the time, that by the way that I was kind of like arming myself, I felt that I was ready to at least defend myself to the best of my ability. So those are some hood stories. There's still plenty of things that happen, especially like if you look up New York City stories. Like the minute you're taking the train to New York, like we're not in New York City, but the minute that you're on the train and you're getting to New York City or whatever, it doesn't matter that things have improved or whatever, there's always fights and always stuff going on in the train all the time. So in that way, there's still like a lot of trashy things that happen on the subway. So anyhow, I hope that you all enjoy these stories. Yeah. I think if anybody has any requests for anything, you can leave them in the comment section. But yeah, so now I guess I will see you guys in the next video.